Hi guys, Shawn Darling here from Griffin's Egg Productions, and we're going to work in Substance Painter today. This is a model that I got from somewhere. Just to start off with that's my disclaimer. We're going to go through painting this guy from scratch. All I've done is properly UV him in Maya. And now we're going to set everything up here in Substance Painter. So the first thing is I'm working in a PBR metallic roughness workflow, and this is Substance Painter 2018.3. So what we need to do first after importing this guy, and like I said, properly having his UVs set up, and I don't know why I keep calling him, but it's, just something I do. First thing we're going to need to do to this model is to set up all of its maps, because there is nothing we can do properly, even though it's UV'd properly, unless we have maps baked out for it. Because if you started painting now or throwing stuff on here, it would not apply it correctly, because it would not understand the shape, curvature, etc. to properly apply things like smart materials and smart masks and so forth. So we're just going to fly over here. You may be set up a little bit differently than me. This is kind of the default. I figured I'd make it easy. But over here in the top, the little top one with the list and the gear here, you can see this is our texture set settings. And right now we have these channels, and we need to set up some more because this is not enough. So I usually like to work with ambient occlusion. Also, I like to add, because these are all going to become V-Ray textures eventually, so I like to add a displacement in case we need it. On this, we'll definitely need glossiness, we'll definitely need reflection, and I think that we're probably good on everything. We're not going to do opacity or emissive or anything like that. So now we have our maps set to 4K. That's how we imported everything in. We're going to go ahead and bake the maps. We're going to set our output size here to 4K. And we're just going to come down here and bake the mesh maps. And that's going to take a few minutes. And I'll probably pause the video for that. All right. And so we have baked out our maps. You can see here that everything that was set up here has been baked out. We have normal, world space, normal ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, position, thickness, as well as everything you're going to see here. So we can go ahead and close that out. And now any material, smart material painting, or anything that we do to this guy will apply correctly. So we're just basically going to do it all as though this is all just one particular material. Unless we need to do some hand painting. So I'm just going to come down here into smart materials, probably look up some painted metal. Depends on how corroded we want to get. This is for a digital set for a feature film, and this is in a detective's office in the 40s. So depends on how corroded or nasty we want to get this. I'm assuming it's probably going to be some painted metal, high temp paint. So I'll type in paint in our little search bar here and just kind of find a few different things that we can test out. Sometimes they allow for change the color, sometimes not. So we're just going to try a few different things. This red painted metal looks kind of cool, so we'll just drop that on there. You can just drag straight out of here on here and wait a few minutes, and you see that it applies. And you can notice right away it does cool stuff. Like our edges are worn and chipped off. See how that has the metal showing through from underneath? There's some wear or some cruddy looking stuff here in the recesses, which is really cool, like oxidization. And so I'm kind of liking that, but we're going to change the color because that's a radiator, not a radiator. Ha ha. Anyway, moving on. Here we go. There's our red. So obviously this material here, red painted robot, is inside of a folder with a whole bunch of layers and things applied. So we open that folder by clicking on it. This is our rusty color that has been applied using this particular mask. And this is probably our metal that's showing through. And here's our red, and it is affected also by this mask. And that mask has controls, you see, like this fill layer, and you can go down to this fill layer and see that it's made. That's just a roughness map that's been applied to the red, and so on. So if we click on the red, knowing that's our paint, we then have the layer controls for that: color, height, roughness, metal, and here's our base color that we want to change. So we're going to click right on that red color and just move this around until we get the color we're looking for. And we don't really want to be pink, so I'm going to go all the way to the red. I'm going to probably adjust this a little bit to where there's could be some yellowish stuff happening in there. You know, just kind of eggshell it instead of making it completely red. It looks like it's okay. That was just some reflective properties of the metal. I thought it was making the metal yellow or gold, but it is not. That's kind of cool like that. That is not bad. I'm going to check out, see, and here is our corrosion layer. So if we turn that off, you can see all that oxidization go away. Turn that back on. I like it. I think it almost needs, I don't know, it feels a little bit too brown, but I'm thinking of just leaving it because I don't hate it. It's kind of cool. I am thinking about adding a little bit of a dust or dirt layer to the top. I mean, because this cop, this detective, he doesn't clean the radiator. You know what I'm saying? He's just not that kind of a housekeeper. So we're gonna go ahead and for example purposes here, I'm gonna click on this top layer and we're gonna add a layer here, and this is a fill layer that adds now above that folder. So we're going to go ahead and close that out. I'm going to delete this default layer. There's no reason for that to be there. It doesn't do anything. So here's our red painted robot. So I'll turn off the fill layer. You can see the original white, I mean, it used to be red, but now the white paint and stuff that we just messed with. And then we added this fill layer on the top. It just floods the whole layer with this white color. So we're going to add now, let's change the color of that to something, and let's turn off all the stuff we don't need. So we don't need height, we don't need metallic, we don't need normal on this, we don't need displacement, we don't need metal of any kind. This is fine here. And we're going to turn on, make the color kind of dirty, like almost sooty or something like that. That looks pretty good. And let's make that a little bit rougher because, you know, depending upon what it is, I think this would be just like dirt smudges. So you see how that affects the entire thing. But we're going to mask this in a way that only puts it where we want to. And there's a few different ways we can do that, but we're going to add a black mask here. And there's our mask. And so now when you add a black mask to the whole thing, it hides the whole thing. But if you paint in here in the mask, or you add a generator or a smart mask in that slot, it will apply this color in whatever way you tell the mask to do it. So we're going to try it with the smart masks here. And I think we're going to just try to make it only affect like the top areas and maybe some of the recesses, but we'll see what's good for that. Let's try this moss from something. It didn't come up fast enough. So I'm just going to drag it across right into that map slot or that mask slot, and it's going to take a second and apply that, and you can see that that's way too much everywhere, even though it's very cool. I mean, if we're doing like a rundown house, this would be perfect. But now we're going to click on this here because this is going to give us our controls for that mask. So there's a lot of different stuff here that we can use. Top down is definitely what we want because we want it more toward the top. So I'm sliding that up, and you're going to see that that changes that gradient, you know, how it's applied. So I kind of like that where it was originally, kind of this top down like so. And then we're going to just see what else we have here. Scratches, micro details, etc. But let's go ahead now and adjust how much of this is affecting what we've got. So I'm going to adjust this level and see how that's going to change things for us. We really only want at the top. That still seems very harsh to me and a little bit much overall. So the contrast is lower. We can turn up the level more, but we want to limit how far down this actually goes. So I'm going to break that up just a little bit more by adjusting the slider back and forth. And now we're going to try and keep that from affecting so much of the surface. And I'm trying to remember which one this is. I believe here in, not that one, in World Space Normal, I think we can adjust top and bottom intensity. So I'm going to turn down the bottom intensity and see if that pulls that back up. Okay, that is literally the underneath side. So that's fine because we do need that. We don't want it necessarily underneath because we want it to look like it's been settling on the top. So the top intensity, that's totally fine. And then front, back, let's try the front intensity and see if we can turn that off a little bit more. That's not actually doing what I'd like it to be doing, but let's turn down the back intensity, the right and the left, and see if we turn up the top intensity. That's just going to leave us with top. There we go. That's more of what I'm talking about. So if that's too dark, we can change that color. We can also lighten that color by going here to the level, and you see this here? This is a slider that basically says that in the base color, because that's where we're at right now selected, we can adjust how much of this entire layer affects, you know, so it's opacity basically right now is what we're controlling. So we can do that. I kind of like it more solid, but we're going to break that up. So I believe, yet again, in our mask builder, we can come down here and adjust the grunge. Should break that up as we increase it. Yeah, that's a little more scattery looking. And like I said, the color is probably a little dark. So we'll check that out here in a second too. I'm just looking to see some of these other controls like scratches. And I'm trying to apply some of this stuff that takes a lot of calculation without crashing anything. So what we're doing is right now, if you see, we're applying some scratches down the sides. We don't need that, and I don't really care for that. It's not what we're wanting to do. So we might be able to adjust the scatter scale. Let's up it a little bit more, see if it makes it bigger or smaller. Doesn't seem to be doing a ton. And maybe it's size that I need to adjust. Don't see that affecting it the way that I'm expecting either. So we'll just put that back about where it was. And probably go on to... we could adjust a few things, but I think our color, I mean, I'm not unhappy with this. I just wanted to see if we could do a little bit more breakup. And we could if we added another effect here. So I'm going to do that manually. So within this layer, with the mask selected, of course, I'm going to add what we call a paint node. And then now we can go in here with we select a brush, like let's use this dirt brush. And we can paint in here. So if I wanted to, see, I can paint more dirt, but actually I want to do the opposite. I'm going to come in here with our eraser with that particular brush selected. And using my pen tablet from Wacom, I'm going to just sort of lightly erase the mask, which it is not allowing me to do. Let me figure out why. I believe because maybe our color needs to be swapped. And that is not why either. Give me 1 second on the paint node. And that is not erasing. This is wonderful when this happens because it's exciting for me, for you and me. All right, so let me figure out what's going on here. We want to be erasing the black parts here. I don't know why it is not. So let me swap. That's adding. Let's swap and see. Okay, there we go. Well, that's actually painting. Is it painting white? No, it is erasing. Okay, so we swapped our color out in the regular paint. And when you're painting black, it's going to paint the thing solid more into your mask. Painting white actually acts like an eraser. Takes a minute, folks. Takes a minute. And so some of this isn't as, there's like a UV edge there I'm not real happy with. And I think I might back some of this off eventually anyway, because it's in his office. It is dirty, but this is a bit more dirty, I think, that really needs to be. So I'm just going to lighten some of this up first, and then we'll probably change the color of that soot just a little bit more, because it might be a little too much. And I know my partner and fiance would say, I just don't think it'd be that dirty. And I would go, you know what, babe? You're absolutely right. As always. Okay, so we're going to now go to that mask. And I think we're going to change this color a little bit. So on our base color, we're just going to, lighten that up a little bit. So we could go all white. But I think if we just have a little bit of dust on top now, like that, that looks much better. I would think I was a little heavy-handed to start with. But that's me. So, frame that out, take a look at it, and I think that's going to work perfectly for us. If we wanted to do anything else, like let's go ahead and add in some grunge around these pipes. So we're going to add another fill layer on top of this one. We're going to now, once again, darken this out. And let's go ahead and add a black mask to clear that out and hide it. But in the black mask now, I think we should just paint. So we're going to take that same dirt brush, because that just seems to be right. Change our size to something a little more manageable. And we're going to basically paint that dark material back in here around some of these connections. Why not? And there's a cool thing that if it cooperates we can do. Let's check out our particles. And this leaks, or one of these like leaks heavy. See this stroke over here? When you stroke, it actually makes this rain particles. See that? Isn't that cool? So let's figure out the best way to do this for our area that we're wanting to do that to. This is dependent on a lot of things, the direction of the model, the UVs, things like that. So not exactly pretty there, or exactly the way I wanted to do that, but not horrible. Trying not to get it on things I don't want it on. So that's not horrible, but see, basically wherever you put these, they run. So that's kind of cool. And it can give you, you know, kind of the idea that these things have leaked and run out. So I'm going to undo all that real quick. Kind of got it in areas I didn't want it. And I'm going to see if there's another version. Like this is called liquid streaks. And we might want to use a smaller brush, but you can kind of see what I'm talking about, though. That's kind of cool. So let's use an even smaller brush, even though that one's pretty dang small, and see what happens. It's a little too small. We're going to come up to about 0.75. They really want to just fly out of there. I like that, though, because it kind of looks like there was a leak sprung and some stuff happened. So, and we'll see how this goes. It's not horrible. Let's try the leaks on that just to see. And even with a small brush, that leak's really is kind of bigger than you expect. So I'm going to try here. I think the leaks is a little too much for some of this. So what I'm going to do is go back to a standard dirt brush. And I know you can adjust the opacity and the flow and everything. See, like here's our flow. So if I was to do it here now, it's going to be a little less dynamic. We might have to actually take that back down quite a bit more. And that's not so bad. And it runs with whatever it believes the gravity is in the scene. So I'm not hating this right now. This is actually looking pretty decent in comparison to what it could have been. So it runs basically a little animation or a little particle simulation to make this happen along the surface. So you got to kind of let it happen. Yeah, so that's not horrible. It's not fantastic either, but it's not horrible. So if you really wanted to go crazy, you can. This liquid, like, you can just pop something out. See, it's a little much. So when you're doing something small, obviously the flow and the size and all that greatly matter. Let's make the size just a little bit bigger because you can't even see those. So yeah, not bad. It's almost like this had a leak. Okay, let's frame that out. See if it's too dark. No, I think that works just fine. So kind of the same thing on this side. So why not? You know what I mean? Why not? We'll go ahead and zoom in here. Frame up our stuff. And do the kind of the same kind of stuff over here. Let's get some blowouts happening. Some pipey edge junk. That's a good band name, by the way. Pipey edge junk. I think that's going to have to happen, folks. So I'm just kind of randomly putting it where it looks like it should be, just quickly. Not doing too specific or too overly detailed, just kind of dirtying those joints up. You don't want to make it look like, you know, it's like a hazard waiting to happen, but also it doesn't need to look like it's been used and things happen to it and so forth. Okay, so maybe a little bit right in here. Yeah, that kind of works for me. Alrighty, so this is where we wind up exporting everything that we've got. So if you wanted to, you could save this off as a smart material or a regular material, whatever. Very simple to do. You just collect all these together, like select all of them, put them in a folder like so, name that folder, and then right-click it and create smart material, and it would appear in your shelf wherever you'd like it to. I'm going to undo that, and we're going to go and export these out. So basically you go to File, Export Textures. I'm going to wind up exporting these as V-Ray type textures. You can see here in our texture set, we're going to generate all these maps. IOR, height, reflection, diffuse. We don't necessarily need some of those for the V-Ray workflow that we're doing, but we're going to generate them anyway in case for something else. So we're going to go ahead and go down here to our models new folder here, and where I have some of this stuff stored. We're going to go ahead and go into here, and we're going to call this, make a new folder, and we're going to call it radiator new maps. And we're going to select that folder. That's going to be now where we're going to send this stuff out. We're going to send it out as 8-bit PNGs at 4K. I'm going to just show this here. So we're going to go ahead and export, and it's going to start writing those maps to that particular place. And we'll pause the video and come back when we apply them. Okay, we're back. And now we're going to, we're done with exporting, so we just say okay, everything closes, and we can just leave this guy here, or we can close it down. But we're going to jump over to Maya. And in Maya, this is a partial environment because I've turned a lot of stuff off that we've already used. We'll go through here and hide some things that we have already saved and used, etc. So we're going to go ahead and just hide those guys and make this a little more easier to see. But we've exported a lot of things out of here and hidden things, the desk, the walls, stuff like that. Cube Brush is the guy, I believe, who made this environment initially. But we're repurposing, resurfacing, and everything on it. So we have our items selected here. We've already applied V-Ray textures to it before we exported it. We've already UV'd it. You can see here in our Windows UV editor that it is UV'd like so. Not 100% the best way, but it works for what we are going to be doing with it. So here in our Radiator tab in the Attribute Editor, we're going to start applying our maps. So in Diffuse Color, we're just going to add a file node. Click on that, and then we're going to go look for our folder that we have everything in. And inside of here, we have our Radiator new maps right here. So we're going to apply our diffuse, and that should pop up and looks beautiful, exactly as it did in Substance Painter. And we're going to start adding our other maps. So I'm going to re-click on the object so we can find the others. And reflection color, of course, we add a file node. And we are going to put our reflection map in there. Click on it again, and our glossiness, reflection glossiness, we're going to add our glossiness map. And you can see that pop up. And we don't, actually, you know, we are going to use the IOR. We'll see if that gives us a problem or not. Sometimes, I mean, for metallic objects, it's great. But when you have something that's not metallic, you have to do a couple things. But it should, and you can see the whole thing looks like it's gone metallic. That's going to depend on how it renders. So we'll double check that in the render. But I also want to make sure that I'm going to click on the map here and go down to, I believe, color balance. And we're going to try alpha is luminance and see if that works or not. But we'll play with that when the render happens here. Let's see. So we go back here, and in our, we're going to add a normal map here. And that's going to be our radiator normal. That's all that we need for this guy. Okay. So now what we're going to do is going to give this a quick render and make sure if that IOR is working properly or not. Okay, so we're starting to render. If this is going to take too long, I will pause, spare you guys. But I want to see if the metallic is too much, which it looks like it might actually be. So I'm going to turn off that alpha is luminance and try rendering this again, because you can see all along the top edge it's very wet. So let's go ahead and stop that render, and we're going to go back into the IOR setting here, and we're going to turn off alpha is luminance and re-render and see. Okay, it's still looking a bit wet. So this may or may not be an issue though when we get over to Marmoset. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this as it is here in Maya, and we're going to do the same thing in Marmoset Toolbag. Okay, here we are in Toolbag. These are the objects that we've already painted, exported, and brought into Marmoset. Now you're looking at a speedy preview. This is not the final rendered look. That's going to be determined by this little rocket right here. Right, we're in speedy viewport mode, so that's why it doesn't look finally rendered. So we're going to go ahead and import our model. And what we're looking for is going to be inside of our particular environment. And this is going to be called the Radiator New. So we're going to bring that in. It's going to go right to the place that it's supposed to be, right here under the window, with no maps applied. So we need to do that ourselves. And you notice we're going through the curtain here a little bit. So we're going to have to move this from its original position to where it's in front of the curtain, and possibly move it over a little bit just to kind of help clear that curtain slightly. I'm going to go ahead and push it back as far as I can without intersecting. So that's probably okay there. Looks good all the way around. So now we're going to add our maps. Remember, this is not the final rendered view. So over here on the side, we have the radiator. We have its map. It's called Radiator 1. So we're going to go ahead and look in our little browser over here for Radiator 1, which is right there. We double click it, and that shows us right here that that is the correct one. And now we have slots. So first thing is the normal map. So we're going to click there. We're going to go into our folder and look for Radiator New Maps. We want our normal map. And here's the ones we generated from Substance Painter. The diffuse, glossiness, height, IOR, normal, reflection. So we're going to double click here. It loads it quickly. We don't have to click the open button. We click on our glossiness map, double click it. We click on our albedo, which is also our diffuse, and that will apply that. And then we click on our specular, which is also our reflection, and it makes it very mirrored. So we're going to turn down the intensity quite a lot on that guy. And we're going to test the IOR. Now, there is a way that I have been applying it, and hopefully that is correct. And if not, somebody yell at me. But I'm going to go on the transparency. I'm going to click on the mask, and I'm going to put in the IOR there. And that seems to do exactly what I need it to do when I do. Hopefully that'll be the case. So we're going to just look over here. All of our textures are applied. They're looking good so far. And let's turn on the render mode and see what it would look like with all the high-end render settings. So it's looking pretty good. It's a tiny bit shiny, but we can adjust that, of course, with gloss and our specularity. But it looks like our metal properties, they're very black. So it's kind of hard to tell because these are the dark. There is nothing reflecting off of them. So I can't say 100% that it's right or not just off the top of my head. But we are going to try and change our index of refraction possibly smaller. And that's going to take a second because obviously we are in non-speedy mode, so it's not as fast to react. Matter of fact, it's super slow at this point because of all the 4K maps and such that we have in here. Okay, that's not going to affect it. So let's turn up our specularity and see if that affects the entire object, which it probably will, which we're not really necessarily wanting to do either. That should jump up here in a second as soon as it catches up. That does change the glossiness of everything, which is not what we want. And I say glossiness in the reflectivity sense. So it's quite possible that our transparency needs to not be set to refraction, and we'll just figure that out. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off and see if that black does in fact go away. There are a couple things that I need to sort out and see what makes that metallicity work better in certain instances than others. So we'll just click none on that. It's going to take a second to catch up because we are in the non-speedy mode. We'll see what happens when that jumps back to none. There we go. And I'm going to take that transparency and just turn it off to none. And now we're going to check again in the non-speedy mode, and I think it's still going to wind up being black. So there's an issue with the metalness of that particular application here. I'm going to try something else real quick. Keep in mind, folks, all of this is problem solving constantly. So this is just one more small issue I've ran into. Once in a while this happens. A lot of the time this works without a hitch, but at the moment we need to jump into metalness or advanced metalness possibly. I don't want to make the whole thing metal is one of the issues. So I'm just trying to see what will help that. Yeah, that's strange that just comes out black though on those areas. IOR typically fixes that in Maya. Okay, so once that catches up, everything should be a little better. the secondary reflections will come off, because that's just way too much. Let me go ahead and turn back on our speedy mode. But I think that looks fine. Yeah, now that it's calmed down and settled itself a bit. Like I said, though, still not a fan of the non-reflective metal strips here that should be completely metal. But you put a direct light on it, it might change things, kind of like we have done here. But this IOR and whatnot that we've done on these, this is for solid full metal without any paint. We're trying to do a combination here, so the maps are supposed to be taking care of that reflective, ability of those pieces of metal, but they don't seem to be doing so, and I'm not exactly sure why that is. So we'll worry about that in a different tutorial or in a different moment. But the point was to show you how to get something painted in Substance Painter from Maya, and then to bring it in to Marmoset Toolbag 3 and get that placed the way you want it to. So with that, I appreciate you watching. Use only licensed software. Be a good guy. Do the right thing. And yeah, happy building and happy rendering.